Fired for paying for an elderly man's gas. Then her phone rang while she cried, "Ma'am, there are 10 millionaires outside your door." The cold wind cut across Emily's face as she observed the quiet activity at the only gas station in Hope Springs, a small town in rural America. Her 15 years of dedicated work at that establishment had earned her not only the respect of the community, but also a deep knowledge of every resident who passed through. The cloudy sky announced another day of harsh winter, typical of that mountainous region. Emily adjusted the worn coat over her gas station uniform, a habit she had developed to face the low temperatures during her shifts. Her thoughts wandered between overdue bills and concern about the increasingly expensive medications that her mother, Martha, needed to take. The soft sound of an old engine interrupted her musings. A navy blue Chevrolet from the 70s approached one of the fuel pumps slowly. From inside the vehicle emerged a fragile-looking gentleman, his hair white as snow and his trembling hands resting on a carved wooden cane. "Good morning, young lady," he greeted, his hoarse voice carrying a gentleness that reminded Emily of her own father. "I need to fill up my tank to get back home. It's 40 miles from here." Emily smiled, noticing the confusion in the elderly man's eyes as he searched the pockets of his time-worn tweed coat. "Don't worry, sir. I'll start pumping while you look." As the fuel flowed into the Chevy's tank, Emily discreetly observed the growing desperation on the gentleman's face. His trembling hands pulled out only a few coins from his pockets, clearly insufficient to cover the cost of the gas. I was certain I had brought enough money," he mumbled, his voice choked with embarrassment. "My memory isn't what it used to be, you know? Sometimes I get confused." Emily's heart tightened. Without hesitation, she took from her own wallet the amount needed to complete the payment. "Don't worry, sir, everything's fine." "But I can't accept," he protested, his trembling hands extending the few coins he had found. "Please, accept it. You need to get home safely," Emily insisted, remembering how many times her own mother might have needed similar help. What Emily didn't notice while helping the gentleman back into his car was the watchful eye of Richard Parker, the gas station's new supervisor, who observed the entire scene through the security cameras. Recently hired by the corporation that had acquired the family establishment, Richard represented the new era of management, focused exclusively on numbers and protocols. Minutes after the elderly man's departure, the intercom on the fueling lane crackled. "Emily, report to my office immediately." Richard's metallic voice sounded authoritarian. Emily's heart raced. In 15 years of work, she had never been summoned to the supervisor's office in that manner. Her colleagues cast concerned looks as she walked toward the office, her worn boots echoing down the silent corridor. Richard's office was a stark contrast to the station's former family management, where once hung old photos of the town and certificates of merit. Now there were only performance graphs and a framed corporate manual on the wall. The supervisor waited seated in his leather chair, eyes fixed on the computer screen displaying the security camera footage. "Sit down, Emily," he ordered, without taking his eyes off the screen. "I just witnessed something very serious. Are you aware that paying for customers is expressly prohibited by our code of conduct?" "Mr. Parker, that elderly man needed help to get back home. It was just a few dollars and—" "Rules exist for a reason," he interrupted, finally turning to face her. "It doesn't matter if it was dollars or cents. You violated a clear company policy. Do you know what that means?" Emily felt her blood freeze. Her hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from a mixture of indignation and concern. How would she explain this to her mother? How would she pay the bills? The rent was already late, and the medications. "You're fired," declared Richard, his voice as cold as the wind blowing outside. "Immediately, you can collect your belongings and leave." The world seemed to slow down around Emily. Richard's words echoed in her mind as she walked to her locker, feeling the gazes of colleagues who watched everything in absolute silence, paralyzed by fear of being next. With trembling hands, Emily collected her things. The photo of her mother smiling in front of the town church, the extra coat she always kept for colder days, the small agenda where she noted the birthdays of all regular customers. 15 years of dedication fit into a paper bag. The path home had never seemed so long. The narrow streets of Hope Springs, normally so welcoming, now seemed suffocating. Each person who greeted her, each neighbor who waved, made her heart tighten even more. How? Would she explain her situation? How would she maintain her dignity in a town where everyone knew each other? Upon arriving home, she found her mother sleeping in the living room armchair, a thin blanket over her legs. The television murmured, softly broadcasting one of those talk shows that Martha so enjoyed. Emily swallowed her tears. She couldn't show weakness. Her mother already had enough worries with her own health. In the kitchen, she sat at the old wooden table, the same one her father had made before he passed away. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. She opened her purse and began calculating on a piece of paper. Overdue rent, electricity bill, water, her mother's medications. The severance pay would barely cover a month of expenses. The phone rang, pulling her from her desperate calculations. Emily hesitated before answering, fearing it might be a bill collector. Hello? Please, am I speaking with Miss Emily, the gas station employee who helped an elderly gentleman this morning? The voice on the other end was deep and professional. Yes, that's me, replied Emily, a knot forming in her throat. Had the elderly man fallen ill? Had something happened to him on the road? Ms. Emily, this may seem strange, but there are 10 millionaires outside your house right now. They would very much like to meet you. Emily almost dropped the phone. I beg your pardon? Please look out the window. With wobbly legs, Emily approached the living room curtain. Her heart nearly stopped at the scene. A row of luxury cars parked in front of her modest wooden house. Men and women in elegant attire conversed in small groups, and among them, yes, there was the man with the Chevy, but now he no longer seemed so fragile or confused. I don't understand, murmured Emily, more to herself than to her caller. Ms. Emily, what happened today at the gas station was no accident. The gentleman you helped is Charles Montgomery, one of the country's most respected business consultants. He's conducting a social experiment on kindness and empathy in business, and you, without knowing, have just become the protagonist of something much bigger. Emily felt her legs weaken and had to lean against the wall. The noise from the television in the living room caught her attention. It was the same program her mother was watching, but now it showed images of the gas station, images of her helping Mr. Charles. The millionaires outside are part of a revolutionary television program, continued the voice on the phone. They're looking for people like you, people who maintain their humanity even in the most difficult moments, and they have a proposal that could change your life forever. But I just did what anyone would do, stammered Emily, watching through the window as more cars arrived on her street. Neighbors began to come out of their houses, curious about the unusual activity. That's exactly what makes your actions so special, Miss Emily. Not everyone would do what you did, especially considering your own financial situation. May I ask you to open the door? They would very much like to speak with you in person. Emily took a deep breath, adjusted her hair in an automatic gesture, and walked to the door. The noise from the television woke Martha, who was confusedly observing the movement through the window. Honey, what's happening? Why are you home so early? And what are those cars? Mom, Emily began, but was interrupted by the doorbell. Opening. The door. She found herself facing a group that seemed to have stepped out of the pages of a business magazine. At the front, smiling serenely, stood Charles Montgomery, now with an elegant posture that in no way resembled the fragile gentleman from the gas station. Miss Emily, he began, allow me to introduce myself properly. I am Charles Montgomery, and these are some of the country's most important business leaders. May we come in? The small living room of the Oliver home had never received such distinguished visitors. Emily watched, still dazed, as business executives in impeccable suits made themselves comfortable on her worn sofa. Martha, seated in her favorite armchair, alternated glances between her daughter and the unexpected visitors. Miss Emily, began an elegant woman of approximately 50. My name is Betty Mitchell. I'm the executive producer of the Social Transformation Program. What happened today at the gas station was a test, part of a project that seeks extraordinary people in ordinary situations. Charles Montgomery took the floor. When I entered that gas station, I was playing a role. I wanted to see how people would react to an elderly person in difficulty. We tested this same situation in various places across the country, and do you know how many people did what you did, Emily? None. Emily felt her face burn. But it wasn't anything special. You risked your job to help a stranger, interrupted another executive, an Asian man who introduced himself as Thomas Yang. And not only that, you made a point of preserving my dignity. I mean, the dignity of the character Charles was portraying. That's extraordinary. Betty leaned forward, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. Emily, we're here to offer you a unique opportunity. Our program isn't just an ordinary reality show. It's a project to transform lives through social entrepreneurship. But I don't understand anything about business, protested Emily, remembering. The years of business administration college she had abandoned to care for her mother. I'm just a woman who worked 15 years building valuable relationships with an entire community, completed Charles. Someone who knows every resident of this town by name, who knows their stories, their needs. That, my dear, is worth more than any diploma. It was then that one of the businesswomen, a grey-haired lady with elegant posture, stood up and walked to the shelf where there were some old photographs. She picked up one of the frames and examined it with an intriguing expression. This photo, she murmured, her voice trembling slightly. Where was it taken? Emily approached. It's from my mother's high school graduation in Flowerville. Why? The businesswoman turned slowly, her teary eyes fixed on Martha. Martha, is that really you? Silence took over the room as Martha leaned forward in her armchair, eyes narrowed, trying to recognize that face from the past. Suddenly her expression transformed into astonishment. Margaret? Margaret Oliver? It can't be. The two women stared at each other in a moment of mutual recognition that made Emily feel as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Margaret. Oliver was one of the most respected names in the business world, known for transforming small companies into empires, and apparently she knew her mother. You know each other? Asked Emily, her voice almost a whisper. Margaret wiped away a discreet tear before answering, Your mother and I, we were best friends in our teens, but there was a misunderstanding, a poorly told story. We drifted apart even before graduation. Martha sobbed softly. Margaret, after so much time, you're one of these executives. Life takes interesting turns, doesn't it? Smiled Margaret, sitting next to Martha. And now I'm here, about to make a proposal that could change your daughter's life. Betty cleared her throat softly, resuming control of the meeting. Emily, our program offers much more than money. We offer mentorship, networking, and most importantly, a chance to create something meaningful for your community. But how? Asked Emily, still processing everything that was happening. I just lost my job. I have overdue bills. My mother needs medication. And that's exactly why this moment is perfect, intervened Thomas. You're free to start over, to build something new, and you won't be alone. Charles Montgomery opened his briefcase and removed some documents. Our proposal is simple. You'll participate in a reality show unlike anything ever done before. For a year, you'll receive guidance from the country's 10 greatest entrepreneurs to develop your own business. A year, Emily frowned. But how? Will I support myself during that time? The program provides a monthly stipend, explained Betty. In addition, you'll receive initial capital for your venture. The only condition is that it must benefit your community. Margaret, who was still holding Martha's hand, added, And I personally insist on ensuring that all your mother's medical costs are covered during this period. Emily felt the tears she had held back all day begin to flow. That's so generous, but why me? There must be more qualified people. Technical qualifications can be learned, replied Charles. Character, empathy, connection with the community, that's much rarer and more valuable. It was then that one of the cameras accompanying the team captured something interesting. Through the living room window, a small crowd could be seen forming outside. They were town residents, curious about the unusual movement of luxury cars. Look at that, smiled Thomas, pointing to the window. I think we've just found your first group of supporters. Among the people on the street, Emily recognized Mrs. June, a 78-year-old lady who always filled up her old car at the station. Mr. Frank, the baker who supplied fresh bread every morning. And even some of her former co-workers, who apparently had finished their shifts. "You know what impressed me most in the video we recorded today?" asked Betty. "It wasn't just your act of kindness. It was how all the other gas station employees reacted. They clearly respect and admire you. That isn't earned overnight." Emily stood up and walked to the window, observing her neighbors. People she had known for years, who trusted her, who shared their stories while filling up their cars or buying coffee at the station's convenience store. "What if," she began, an idea starting to form in her mind. "What if I could create something that would primarily help the elderly in our town? Something that combined quality, service with that personal care they no longer find in establishments that have been bought by large corporations." The entrepreneurs exchanged looks of approval. Charles smiled, recognizing the sparkle in Emily's eyes. The same sparkle he had seen earlier when she hadn't hesitated to help him. "I think we've just found the beginning of your project," he said. "But before we get into details, I need to ask a fundamental question. Are you prepared to have your life completely transformed? Because once you say yes, there's no going back." Emily looked at her mother, who was smiling through tears as she chatted quietly with Margaret. She looked at her father's photo on the wall, at the bills scattered on the kitchen table, at the hopeful faces outside her house. 15 years working at the gas station had taught her more than she imagined, about people, about needs, about community. 3 months had passed since that night that changed Emily's life. The small wooden house now served as the operations base for her nascent project, a meal service specially developed for the elderly in the region, with personalized menus and home delivery. The kitchen, once silent except for the occasional sound of Martha's television, now buzzed with activity. Emily had hired 3 former colleagues from the gas station: Mary Carver, who specialized in traditional regional recipes; John, who knew every shortcut and road in town; and April, whose welcoming smile won over all customers. "Emily," Mrs. June called, asking if we can include more ginger in her broth. "She says it's helping with her rheumatism," informed April while organizing the day's deliveries. "Of course we can," replied Emily, making notes on her tablet. A gift from Thomas to help with business management. "And how is Mr. Frank doing, since we changed the amount of salt in his meals?" "Oh, his daughter said his blood pressure is more controlled, and he loved that cassava bread that Mary invented." Emily smiled, remembering Charles Montgomery's words. "True social entrepreneurship isn't just about selling a product, but about solving real community problems." The television program was an unexpected success. The cameras discreetly followed. The company's day-to-day operations, showing how a simple idea could transform lives. The audience identified with Emily, an ordinary woman who, even facing difficulties, found a way to help others. Margaret Oliver, who now spent a lot of time with Martha reminiscing about their youth, had become a tireless mentor. Her experience in the food industry was proving fundamental for the business's growth. "Emily," called Margaret, entering the kitchen with some papers in hand, "we need to talk about something important." Emily felt a chill in her stomach, that tone of voice. Did something happen? "Yes, but don't worry. Remember that satisfaction survey we implemented last month? The results have arrived, and there's something interesting here." Margaret spread the papers on the table. Graphs and tables showed impressive approval numbers, but there was more. Customers were reporting significant improvements in their health and well-being. "It's not just about the food," explained Margaret. "It's about the social impact. Your delivery people don't just drop off meals, they chat, they listen, they keep company. Some elderly folks say it's the most anticipated moment of their day." Emily felt her eyes tear up. But that wasn't in the business plan. "Exactly," exclaimed Margaret. "You've created something unique, something big corporations can't replicate. It's what we call relationship-based competitive advantage." At that moment, the phone rang. It was Betty, the program's producer. "Emily, you won't believe it." Her voice overflowed with enthusiasm. "We just received a proposal from a major delivery network. They want to buy your business." Emily's heart raced. An acquisition? So soon? What's the value? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. $5 million, replied Betty. It's a very generous offer for a company with only 3 months of operation. Emily looked around, at Mary Carver seasoning a broth with fresh herbs from the garden, at John organizing delivery routes with care, at April animatedly talking on the phone with a customer. She observed her mother and Margaret in the garden, laughing like teenagers while tending to the herb garden that supplied fresh ingredients for the kitchen. No, she replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. It's not for sale. Are you sure? Insisted Betty. $5 million is a lot of money. What we've built here is priceless, explained Emily. Each recipe, each smile, each shared story. This can't be bought. Little did Emily know that her refusal would trigger a series of events that would test not only her enterprise, but also her determination to keep alive the values that had brought her this far. The news of Emily's refusal of the $1 million offer spread quickly through town. To the surprise of many, the reaction was one of approval and pride. The residents saw in her something they hadn't found in a long time, someone who chose people over profit. However, not everything was rosy. 2 weeks after the refusal, a yellow van parked in the central square of Hope Springs. It was the first vehicle of a new delivery company that promised to revolutionize the local market with unbeatable prices. Fast meal, express meals with 50% discount in the first month, announced the colorful flyers distributed throughout the town. They're targeting us directly, observed John, showing one of the flyers to Emily. How are we going to compete with these prices? Emily felt the weight of concern, but maintained the calm she had learned to cultivate in the past months. We're not going to compete on price. We're going to strengthen what makes us unique. That same afternoon, an emergency meeting was called. In the back room of the house, which had been transformed into an office, Emily, her team, Margaret, and Charles Montgomery, who had made a point of coming personally when he heard about the situation, gathered. They have millions to invest, explained Charles, analyzing the competitors' promotional materials. They can operate at a loss for months until they suffocate local businesses. But they also have weaknesses, intervened Margaret. They're impersonal, standardized, with no connection to the community. Emily listened attentively, her hands busy peeling an orange. The citrus aroma filled the room, bringing memories of her childhood when her grandmother prepared sweets to sell at the fair. That's it, she exclaimed, surprising everyone. The fair? What do you mean? Asked April. The Sunday fair. It's a centuries-old town tradition. All the small producers gather there. What if? Emily paused, organizing her thoughts. What if we joined forces with them? Charles leaned forward, interested. Go on. We can create a network of local suppliers, Mr. Anthony's cheese, Mrs. Rose's vegetables, Joaquin's honey. Each of our meals would tell the story of these producers. Margaret smiled, proud. A shared value chain. Exactly. Emily was increasingly excited. And we can do more. What about a special day at the fair where our elderly customers can personally meet who produces the ingredients for their meals? The idea quickly took shape. John suggested a ride-sharing system for elderly people who couldn't go to the fair alone. Mary Carver proposed traditional cooking workshops. April remembered that many of the elderly had their own family recipes that could be incorporated into the menu. This isn't just a business defending itself against competition, observed Charles. It's a community strengthening itself. The program's cameras captured the entire transformation process. The audience watched, fascinated, as Emily's small company became the center of a collaboration network that recovered traditions and strengthened community bonds. The following Sunday, Hope Springs Fair was different. A large, colorful tent had been set up in the center, with tables and chairs arranged in a circle. There, elderly people shared stories and recipes with local producers, while children ran between stalls decorated with old photos of the town. Emily observed everything with tears in her eyes when she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Richard Parker, her former supervisor from the gas station. Emily, he seemed embarrassed. Can I talk to you for a minute? Emily's heart raced. but something in Richard's downcast posture made her accept the conversation. "I came to apologize," he said, surprising her. "After you left, things at the station. They haven't been the same. Customers ask about you every day. And now, seeing what you've built here." He paused, swallowing hard. "Well, let's just say, I've learned a valuable lesson about the true meaning of management." The success of the Sunday fair exceeded all expectations. What began as a defensive strategy against competition transformed into a cultural renewal movement in Hope Springs. The program's cameras captured increasingly meaningful moments. Elderly, people teaching old recipes to young chefs, town stories being recorded in a community memory book, almost forgotten traditions coming back to life. On a particularly busy morning, while Emily organized preparations for another day of deliveries, Charles Montgomery appeared without warning, carrying a black notebook worn by time. "Emily," he called, his face showing a peculiar expression. "I need to show you something." She led him to her improvised office, where the aroma of fresh bread mingled with the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Charles sat down, placing the notebook on the table with reverence. "This notebook," he began, "contains all the business strategies I've developed. Over 50 years of my career. Notes, observations, lessons learned. I've never shown this to anyone." Emily felt the weight of that moment. "Why are you showing it to me now?" "Because you've done something I never managed to," he replied, leafing through the yellowed pages. "You've created a business that not only generates profit, but truly transforms lives." At that moment, April rushed into the office. "Emily, you need to see this." On the computer screen, a viral video showed the moment when Emily had helped Charles at the gas station months ago. The video had been shared thousands of times, with a hashtag that was quickly becoming a trend: Emily Effect. "People are replicating your gesture," explained April, showing several other videos. "At gas stations, supermarkets, bakeries, these are stories of people helping the elderly all over the country." Emily could hardly believe it. Her small act of kindness had triggered a wave of solidarity that was spreading like a positive virus through social media. "That's why I brought the notebook," said Charles, smiling. "Your business strategies didn't come from books or theories. They came from the heart, from empathy, from real connection with people. But now," he pushed the notebook towards her, "now it's time to take the next step." The pages of the notebook revealed much more than business strategies. They were life stories, deep reflections on the role of business in society, detailed analyses of how companies could be agents of social transformation. "Emily!" Mary Carver burst through the door. "The fast meal van. They're collecting their equipment. It looks like they're leaving town." Charles smiled. "I'm not surprised. They realize they can't compete with something they don't understand. The power of a united community." That afternoon, while studying Charles's notebook, Emily received an unexpected call. It was an unknown number, but she immediately recognized the voice on the other end, Richard Parker, her former supervisor. "Emily," he seemed nervous, "remember when you told me something seemed odd about the station's accounts? Well, you were right. I discovered something you need to see." Emily's heart raced. During her last months at the station, she had noticed discrepancies in the financial reports, but no one had listened to her observations. "What are you talking about, Richard?" "Embezzlement," he whispered. "A lot of money. And it wasn't me. It was someone much higher up in the corporation. I have all the documents with me. Emily, I need your help." She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Charles's notebook was open to a page that seemed terribly appropriate for that moment. The greatest opportunities for transformation often present themselves disguised as seemingly unsolvable problems. "Where can we meet?" she asked already, knowing she was about to dive into another twist in her journey. The meeting with Richard took place at the Old Town Church, a quiet and discreet place where they could talk without drawing attention. The program's cameras were kept at a distance, respecting the sensitivity of the situation. "The corporation was using the station as a front for an overcharging scheme," explained Richard, showing spreadsheets and documents. "When you were fired, I started investigating. Something about your integrity made me question my own actions." Emily examined the documents carefully. Years of managing the station's cash register had given her a sharp eye for numbers. This explains why prices increased so much after the corporation took over. And that's not all, continued Richard. They're doing the same in other small towns. They buy traditional family businesses, fire long-time employees, implement predatory practices. At that moment, Emily felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. It wasn't just about her or her business. It was about all the small towns facing the same problem. "What do you plan to do?" she asked. "I've already forwarded everything to the proper authorities," replied Richard. "But there's one more thing. The gas station property, the very one where you worked for 15 years, they're planning to sell it." Emily frowned. "Sell? But that station is practically a town landmark." "Exactly. And guess who's interested in buying? Fast Meal. They may have collected their equipment, but they haven't given up. They want to transform the location into a distribution center." Emily's brain began working quickly. Charles Montgomery's notebook had taught her to see opportunities where others saw only problems. An idea began to form in her mind. "Richard," she said, grabbing her tablet, "I need you to help me. Gather some people." In the following weeks, a series of secret meetings took place at Emily's house. Margaret Oliver, using her contacts in the business world, gained access to crucial information about the property's real value. Charles Montgomery, with his experience in complex negotiations, helped structure a bold plan. "It's risky," warned Margaret during one of these meetings. "But if it works..." "It's not just about business," interrupted Emily. "It's about preserving the soul of our town." The plan was daring. Create a cooperative, uniting all the small local entrepreneurs who had come together during the Sunday fairs. Together, they would have enough strength to make an offer for the gas station property. "But what would we do with the station?" asked John during one of the meetings. Emily smiled, unrolling a large architectural blueprint on the table. "It wouldn't just be a station anymore. It would be a community center for coexistence and entrepreneurship. A place where our elderly could gather, where small producers would have space to sell their products, where the town's traditions would be preserved and celebrated." The program's cameras, which had maintained a respectful distance during the more sensitive negotiations, now documented something extraordinary, an entire community mobilizing around a common dream. Martha, observing all the activity from her favorite armchair, held her old friend Margaret's hand. "Who would have thought," she murmured, "that my daughter would fulfill the dream that we both had in our youth?" Margaret wiped away a discreet tear. "What dream?" "Of creating something that would really make a difference in people's lives," replied Martha. "Remember, we planned to open a business together, something that would help our town, before that misunderstanding separated us." Margaret's gaze was lost in memories. "It's never too late to fulfill old dreams, is it?" News of the cooperative's formation spread rapidly throughout Hope Springs. In just 2 weeks, more than 50 small business owners had joined the initiative. Emily's office transformed into an improvised headquarters, where dreams and numbers blended in spreadsheets and projects. "We've managed to gather 70% of the necessary amount," announced Margaret during a particularly tense meeting. "But we're still short $300,000. Emily bit her lip, studying the numbers for the 1,000th time. The deadline to present the purchase proposal for the property was running out, and Fast Meal had already made their offer. "What if," she began, leafing through Charles's notebook, "what if we organized an event?" "What kind of event?" asked April, who, in addition to serving customers, had become a sort of public relations coordinator for the cooperative. "A festival," replied Emily, her eyes shining with the idea taking shape. "Not just a food festival, but a celebration of hope. Spring's history. Each family could share their traditional recipes, tell their stories. And we could charge for tickets," completed John, excited. "We could use the central square, set up booths." The Flavors and Memories of Hope Springs Festival was organized in record time. The program's cameras documented the transformation of the central square. Colorful booths were erected, each telling the story of a traditional town family. The aroma of homemade delicacies mixed with old songs played by local musicians. At the center of it all, A photo exhibition told the history of the gas station through the decades. Black and white photos showed the town's first cars being fueled, children buying popsicles at the old convenience store, drivers stopping for coffee and a chat. "Just look at this," said Mrs. June, pointing to a yellowed photo. "This was my father. He always stopped here on his trips between neighboring towns. The station was like a second home for travelers. The festival attracted not only local residents, but people from the entire region. Journalists from major media outlets appeared, drawn by the story of the ex-employee who now led a resistance movement against large corporations. It was during the festival that something unexpected happened. A team of geologists, hired to conduct a preliminary study of the gas station property for the possible construction of Fast Meals Distribution Center, made a surprising discovery. "Emily," called Richard, running toward her with some papers in hand. "You need to see this immediately." The geological reports revealed something extraordinary. Beneath the gas station property, at a considerable depth, there was a mineral water source with unique properties. The preliminary analysis indicated a high concentration of beneficial minerals for health, especially for elderly people. "This changes everything," murmured Margaret, examining the reports. "The real value of that property is much greater than we imagined." Emily sat down, stunned by the revelation. Charles Montgomery's words echoed in her mind. "Sometimes the solution to a problem is literally beneath our feet." "But how are we going to get the money to exploit this?" asked John, expressing everyone's concern. It was then that Betty, the program's producer, approached with a mysterious smile. "Emily, remember those 10 millionaires who appeared at your door on the first day? Well, they just watched the preview of the documentary about your journey. And they have a proposal to make." Emily's heart raced. She looked around at the hopeful faces of her collaborators, at her mother chatting animatedly with old friends, at the elderly dancing to traditional music, at children running between the booths. All that movement, all that life, had begun with a simple act of kindness. "What's the proposal?" she asked, already feeling she was about to embark on another extraordinary adventure. The investors' proposal was more than Emily could have imagined. They not only offered the capital needed to purchase the property and exploit the mineral spring, but also proposed creating something revolutionary: an integrated wellness center that would combine the existing healthy food services with natural therapies based on the unique properties of the newly discovered water. "We want to replicate your business model in other small towns," explained one of the investors during a special meeting. "Not just the wellness center, but the entire philosophy of valuing community and local traditions." News of the mineral. Spring discovery quickly overshadowed Fast Meals' proposal. The corporation that managed the gas station, upon learning of the property's potential, tried to multiply the selling price, but was surprised by an emergency municipal legislation that declared the site a historical and cultural heritage of the town. "You can't do this," protested the corporation's representative during a public hearing. "Actually, we can," replied the mayor, holding up a petition with more than 5,000 signatures, practically the entire adult population of the town. "This station isn't just a commercial establishment, it's part of our history." The following weeks were filled with intense work. Architects and engineers were hired to develop a project that would preserve the station's historical structure while incorporating modern wellness facilities. Emily insisted that the project include a memorial telling the story of the location and the families who had worked there over the decades. "Look at this," said Charles Montgomery, showing Emily a specific page from his notebook. 30 years ago, I wrote about a concept I called companies with soul. Businesses that grow not just in numbers but in meaning for the community. You managed to create this naturally. The Wellness Center project began to take shape. The old fueling area would be transformed into a therapeutic garden where the elderly could participate in outdoor activities. The convenience store would become an organic cafe, serving local products and traditional recipes. And at the heart of the complex, a modern glass structure would house the facilities for treatments with the mineral water. During one of the planning meetings, Richard, who had become an important ally, made an interesting observation. "You know what's most ironic? If I hadn't fired Emily that day, none of this would have happened." "The universe has a funny way of working," replied Margaret, who now spent more and more time with Martha, recovering decades of lost friendship. "Sometimes we need to lose something precious to find something even more valuable." The transformation of the old gas station began to attract national attention. Journalists from all over the country visited Hope Springs to document the phenomenon that was being called the silent revolution of small-town America, a movement to valorize small towns and their traditions. One afternoon, while supervising the beginning of construction, Emily found something special, an old rusted sign that had fallen behind a cabinet during the cleaning of the station's office. It was the establishment's first operating license, dated 1952, with a phrase that made her eyes water: "Serving our community with dedication and love." "You know what's most beautiful in all this?" commented Martha, watching her daughter hang the restored sign in a prominent place in the new memorial. "You haven't just preserved a place, you've kept its true purpose alive." That night, during a special dinner that brought together everyone involved in the project, Emily finally understood the true dimension of her journey. It wasn't just about creating a successful business or saving a historic site. It was about reconnecting people, rescuing values, and showing that progress doesn't need to mean the end of traditions. "A toast," proposed Charles Montgomery, raising his glass, "to the woman who taught us that. True innovation isn't about destroying the old, but about finding new ways to preserve what really matters." The program's cameras captured that moment with special sensitivity: smiling faces, tears of joy, warm embraces. It was the perfect portrait of a community that had rediscovered its own strength. A year had passed since that morning at the gas station. Hope Springs was no longer the same town, and Emily definitely was no longer the same person. The Hope Springs Wellness Center, as the new venture was named, was preparing for its official inauguration. The old structure of the gas station had been magnificently preserved and integrated into the new complex. The fuel pumps had been transformed into works of art, covered with mosaics that told the town's history. The old office, where Emily had been fired, now housed a local memory museum with photos and objects donated by residents. "It's amazing how everything connects," observed Margaret, walking alongside Emily through the newly planted therapeutic gardens. "Every decision you made, every person you helped, every obstacle you faced, it all led to this moment." The center had already begun operating in a testing phase, and the results were surprising. Preliminary studies indicated that the combination of personalized nutrition, developed by Emily and her team, and treatments with the mineral water was providing significant improvements in the health of the elderly. "Mrs. June says she doesn't feel the pain in her knee anymore," commented April, consulting her notes. "And Mr. Frank, his blood pressure is more controlled than ever." The program's cameras captured the final preparations for the inauguration. The production team, which initially planned to follow Emily, for just 6 months, ended up documenting a full year of transformations. The documentary would be broadcast nationwide the following week. "Emily," called John, running toward her with an envelope in his hands, "you won't believe what just arrived." It was a letter from the Department of Health. The therapeutic properties of the mineral water had been officially recognized, and the center would be included in a pilot program of alternative treatments for senior citizens. "This means," Emily began, hardly able to believe it. "It means that Medicare will cover part of the treatments," completed Margaret, embracing her. "The center will be accessible to everyone regardless of financial condition." The news spread quickly through town. On the eve of the inauguration, a line of elderly people was already forming at the center's office, all eager to sign up for the program. During the final meeting with the team before the big day, Emily made a point of recognizing each person who had contributed to that dream. Mary Carver, who transformed old recipes into modern treatments. John, who knows every street and every story in this town. April, who makes each client feel special. Richard, who had the courage to admit his mistakes and help correct them. Charles Montgomery, who observed everything with a proud smile, made a final note in his notebook. Sometimes, An entrepreneur's greatest legacy isn't the empire they build, but the lives they transform in the process. That night, after everyone had left, Emily remained alone at the center, walking through the silent corridors. She stopped in front of a special wall where the old uniforms of former gas station employees had been hung, including her own, now framed like a precious relic. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from Betty. "Emily, the numbers are in. The documentary about your story is already the most anticipated of the year. But there's more. Business leaders from all over the country are getting in touch, wanting to learn from your business model." Sitting on one of the garden benches, Emily looked at the stars shining over Hope Springs. She remembered the words her father used to say, "There's no such thing as a small act of kindness. Each kind gesture is like a seed that, planted in the right place, can generate an entire forest." A silent tear rolled down her face when she realized she had done exactly that. Transformed a simple act of kindness into a revolution of gentleness and social entrepreneurship that was now beginning to spread throughout the country. The day of the Hope Springs Wellness Center inauguration dawned with an extraordinarily blue sky. The streets of Hope Springs were decorated with banners and flowers, and the aroma of fresh coffee and homemade bread filled the air. "Is everything ready?" Emily asked her team, gathered in the main hall. "More than ready," replied April, adjusting. The new uniform everyone wore, a light blue apron with the center's logo embroidered in gold, a subtle reference to the old gas station aprons. The 10 original investors arrived early, each bringing a surprise. They had selected 10 other small towns across America to replicate the Hope Springs model, adapting it to the characteristics and traditions of each region. "But you, Emily, will be the main consultant for all these projects," announced Betty, handing her a folder with the details. "Your knowledge and sensitivity are irreplaceable." The inauguration ceremony was broadcast live to the entire country. The documentary would be shown right after, telling the complete story of that extraordinary transformation. The cameras captured every detail. The moment when Emily cut the inaugural ribbon alongside her mother and Margaret, the choir of elderly people singing traditional songs, the town's children releasing biodegradable balloons into the sky. Charles Montgomery took the stage for a special speech. "Today we're not just inaugurating a wellness center. We're inaugurating a new development model, which proves that it's possible to grow economically without losing our humanity, that it's possible to innovate without destroying traditions, that it's possible to be big without ceasing to be kind." Next, it was Emily's turn to speak. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the microphone, but her voice was firm and clear. "A year ago, when I was fired from the gas station for helping an elderly gentleman, I thought my life was over. Today, I realize it was just beginning. This center isn't mine. It's ours. It belongs to each person who believed, who contributed, who didn't give up on dreaming." Her voice faltered when she saw Mrs. June approaching the stage with something in her hands. It was a small photo album. "Emily, dear, we found some more old photos of the station. Look at this one." The photo showed Emily's father, still young, helping a driver with a broken-down car. On the back, a date, 1985, and a simple note, "Always help those in need." That's the true essence of service. "And that's why," continued Emily, showing the photo to the audience, "we've decided to create a special program, the Kindness Fund. Part of the center's profits will be allocated to help other small entrepreneurs keep their traditional businesses alive, preserving the soul of our small towns." The announcement was received with a thunderous ovation. Richard, who now coordinated the center's social responsibility program, already had a list of traditional establishments that would receive the fund's first support. At the end of the ceremony, while guests explored the facilities, Emily found a moment of quietude in the therapeutic garden. There, seated on a wooden bench made by local craftsmen, she opened the notebook that Charles Montgomery had given her. On the last page, she found a recent note written by her mentor's firm hand. "Dear Emily, you haven't just learned the lessons in this notebook, you've surpassed them. You've created something that goes far beyond business. You've created a social transformation movement that began with a simple act of kindness and is now spreading across the country. Continue being who you are. The world desperately needs people like you. The sun was beginning to set in Hope Springs, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. From the newly inaugurated center came sounds of laughter, music, and animated conversations, the perfect melody of a living and united community. Martha approached her daughter, accompanied by Margaret. The two reconciled friends brought cups of tea made with herbs from the therapeutic garden. "Honey," said Martha, sitting beside Emily, "your father would be so proud." Emily smiled, hugging her mother. "You know what? I think he is. And I think he always knew that a small act of kindness can change the world."